The boardroom fell silent as Deanna James, my stepmother of 8 years, finished her presentation. 20 pairs of eyes shifted uncomfortably between us, waiting to see how I would respond to her brutal assessment of my capabilities. "Thank you for your concerns," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But as my father's chosen successor and majority shareholder, I believe my track record speaks for itself." Diana's perfect red lips curved into a condescending smile. "Olivia, dear, running a small marketing division is hardly preparation for leading James Global. The board deserves a CEO with real experience. My name is Olivia James, and 2 months ago, my father's unexpected death thrust me into a battle I never wanted. Michael James had built James Global from nothing into a $4 billion technology empire, earning both respect and enemies along the way. I was his only child." Though Diana seemed determined to make everyone forget that fact. "Your marketing division, while quaint," Diana continued, clicking to another slide, "represents less than 2% of company revenue. Meanwhile, the divisions I've overseen have shown consistent growth of 15% year over year." What she didn't mention was how those divisions had achieved such growth. I discovered the truth 3 days ago, hidden in an encrypted folder on my father's personal laptop. But I kept my face neutral, remembering his final words to me. "The timing matters, Liv," he'd said, clutching my hand in his hospital room. "Promise me you'll wait for the right moment." Now, watching Diana lay out her case for why she should be named CEO, I understood what he'd meant. She was confident, too confident. She thought she had it all figured out. The board, the numbers, the perfect plan to push me aside. Furthermore, Diana gestured to another chart. "Olivia lacks the international experience crucial for our expansion plans. She's never even lived abroad, while I spent 5 years managing our European operations." I caught Thomas Chen, my father's oldest friend and board member, watching me with concern. He'd been trying to warn me for weeks that Diana was planning something. I gave him a slight nod, letting him know I was okay. "I moved to call a vote," Diana announced. "For the good of the company, we need to act quickly. The markets are watching." "This is highly irregular," Thomas protested. "Michael's will was clear about succession." Diana's smile didn't waver. "Wills can be challenged when there's clear evidence of diminished capacity. Michael was ill for months before he passed. His judgment was compromised." The accusation hung in the air. My father, the brilliant strategist who had outsmarted competitors for decades, supposedly too addled to know what he was doing when he named me his successor. "I have documentation," Diana continued smoothly, "from his doctors about his condition in those final months, and statements from several key employees about concerning decisions he made. All fabricated, of course, but the board didn't know that. They'd seen my father's decline, watched him grow weaker. Diana had made sure she was always by his side, controlling who could visit, what medications he received. I opened my laptop, pretending to review some notes while actually checking the surveillance feed from Diana's office. Right on schedule, Marcus Foster, her right-hand man, was letting himself in with the key she'd given him. In exactly 17 minutes, he would find what I'd left for him to find. "Perhaps," I said carefully, "we should take some time to review all the documentation, including my father's personal records." Diana's eyes narrowed slightly. "I don't see the need for delay. The situation is clear." "Is it?" I asked, watching a live feed as Marcus began searching Diana's office. "Are you sure there isn't anything else the board should know before making such an important decision?" She caught something in my tone, a hint of challenge that made her pause. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across her perfect features. Then her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. I knew what it said. "We have a problem." Diana glanced at her phone, then back at me. The first crack in her composure appeared. "Maybe," I continued, "we should discuss the real numbers behind those growing divisions, the ones that don't appear in official reports." Color drained from her face. "I don't know what you're implying." "No implications," I said calmly. "Just facts. Would anyone like to see them?" I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a thick folder, copies of everything I'd found in my father's hidden files. Evidence of Diana's elaborate scheme to inflate profits, hide losses, and systematically loot the company's assets. "This meeting is adjourned," Diana announced abruptly, standing up. "We'll reconvene when everyone has had time to." "Sit down," I said quietly. "We're not finished." The authority in my voice, so like my father's, made her freeze. The board members watched in stunned silence as I opened the folder and began laying out documents. 3 years ago, someone began manipulating the books in our European operations. The next hour was surgical. I walked the board through Diana's elaborate fraud, document by document, revealing how she'd systematically looted the European divisions while cooking the books to show record profits. These statements, I said, pulling up more files on the display screen, show transfers to offshore accounts controlled by shell companies. Companies that, coincidentally, were all registered by Diana's brother in the Cayman Islands. This is absurd, Diana snapped, but her voice wavered. These documents are clearly fabricated. Are they? I turned to face her directly. Like the medical records you fabricated about my father's mental state. I clicked to the next slide, surveillance footage from my father's hospital room. Diana's face went white as she watched herself on screen, arguing with my father's doctor. I need you to adjust his medication records, she was saying. Make it look like his cognitive function was declining faster than it was. The doctor's response was clear. That would be illegal, Mrs. James. It would be profitable, Diana countered, pulling out her checkbook. I stopped the video there. The boardroom was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. My father knew, I said softly. He discovered what you were doing months ago. But instead of confronting you immediately, he started gathering evidence. He wanted to understand how deep the corruption went, who else was involved. Thomas Chen leaned forward. That's why he pushed through those last-minute security upgrades. The new cameras, the enhanced monitoring systems. I nodded. Every office, every meeting room, every conversation recorded and backed up to servers only he could access. Servers he gave me access to 3 days before he died. Diana's lawyer finally found his voice. These recordings, if they exist, were obtained without consent. They're inadmissible. In court perhaps, I agreed. But we're not in court. We're in a boardroom, and the board has a right to know exactly who they're considering for CEO. I turned to another slide, financial records showing the true state of our European operations. The divisions Diana claimed were growing at 15% were actually hemorrhaging money, their losses hidden through creative accounting and outright fraud. The real numbers, I continued, show losses exceeding $300 million. Money that was siphoned off through a complex network of shell companies and fake vendors. Would you like to explain that, Diana? She stood up abruptly, gathering her papers. I don't have to listen to these slanderous accusations. My lawyers will. Sit down, I repeated, my voice harder now. You wanted a vote on leadership. Let's have one. But first, let's make sure the board has all the facts. I clicked through more evidence, emails between Diana and her conspirators, bank statements showing the stolen funds being moved through multiple accounts, and finally, footage of her meeting with competitors, selling them our trade secrets. Your stellar performance reviews, I added, the ones you've been using to justify your leadership bid. Let's look at how those were really achieved. More surveillance footage played. Diana threatening employees, promising promotions in exchange for false statements about my capabilities, orchestrating a systematic campaign to undermine my position in the company. Enough, Thomas Chen said firmly. I think we've seen sufficient evidence. He turned to Diana, his expression cold. Mrs. James, given these revelations, I believe it would be best if you resigned immediately. Diana's lawyer touched her arm, whispering urgently, but she shook him off. This isn't over, she hissed at me. You have no idea what you're doing, you stupid girl. I smiled slightly, remembering all the times she called me that over the years. Actually, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm protecting my father's legacy and sending you to prison. On cue, the boardroom doors opened. 2 FBI agents stepped in, followed by forensic accountants who had been waiting to seize Diana's records. Mrs. Diana James, one agent announced, you're under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. I watched as they led her away in handcuffs, her perfect composure finally shattered. The board members sat in stunned silence until Thomas cleared his throat. Well, he said, I believe we still have a leadership vote to conduct. He looked around the room. All in favor of confirming Olivia James as CEO. Every hand went up. The weeks following Diana's arrest were a blur of damage control and reorganization. The press had a field day. Jamie's Global Jurai Ima. Stepmother's plot foiled by founder's daughter, and corporate COVP, NDs in hand CUFFs. I spent most of my time in my father's old office, my office now, working with forensic accountants to untangle Diana's web of fraud. The true scope of her crimes was staggering. Beyond the $300 million stolen from European operations, we discovered dozens of other schemes, bringing the total close to $500 million. Late one evening, as I was reviewing more financial records, Thomas Chen knocked on my door. "You're working too hard," he said, setting a cup of coffee on my desk. "Just like your father used to." I leaned back, rubbing my tired eyes. "There's so much to fix, Thomas. Every time we think we found everything, something else comes up." He sat down across from me, his expression serious. "There's something you should know, something your father told me before he died." I set down my papers, giving him my full attention. Thomas had been more than just a board member. He'd been my father's closest friend for 30 years. He knew he was dying long before he told anyone else. Thomas said quietly, even before Diana started tampering with his medical records, but he needed time to put everything in place, to make sure you would be ready. Ready for what? For this, he gestured around the office. He knew Diana would make her move as soon as he was gone. That's why he installed those cameras, gave you access to his private servers. He was building your case for you. I felt tears threatening but held them back. Why didn't he just confront her himself? Why let her keep stealing? Because he wanted more than just to stop her. He wanted to make sure she could never hurt anyone again. And Thomas smiled slightly. He wanted to give you the chance to prove yourself to everyone who ever doubted you. The next morning, I visited Diana in prison. She sat across from me in her orange jumpsuit, her perfectly maintained appearance now showing signs of strain. "Come to gloat?" she asked, her voice bitter. "No," I replied calmly. "I came to ask why. You already had everything, the lifestyle, the status, my father's trust. Why risk it all?" She laughed sharply. "You really don't get it, do you? I had nothing. Everything belonged to your father, and he made it clear it would all go to you. His precious daughter." She spat the word like it tasted bad. "I was just the trophy wife who would never measure up to your dead mother. So you decided to steal what you couldn't inherit?" "I decided to take what I deserved," she snapped. "I made those European divisions successful. I brought in the contracts, managed the relationships, but no matter what I did, I was always going to be second best to you." I studied her for a moment, seeing past the anger to the insecurity beneath. "You're wrong, you know. My father would have taken care of you, made sure you were set for life. But you got greedy, and now you'll lose everything." Her face hardened. "You think you've won? You have no idea what it takes to run this company. You'll fail, and when you do, everyone will see I was right about you." I stood up, straightening my jacket. "Goodbye, Diana. Enjoy the next 20 to 30 years. Back at the office, I called an all-hands meeting. It was time to address the entire company to set a new direction after all the chaos. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces, some familiar, some new, all uncertain about the future, I thought about my father's legacy. "The past few months have been challenging," I began. "We've discovered painful truths about people we trusted, and we've had to face hard realities about our operations. But James Global was built on innovation, integrity, and resilience. Those values didn't leave with my father, and they weren't diminished by one person's greed. I outlined my vision for the company's future: more transparency, stronger oversight, and a renewed focus on ethical business practices." The response was overwhelming. People were ready for change, ready to believe in something better. Over the next year, we turned things around. The European divisions, once Diana's personal piggy bank, became legitimately profitable under new leadership. We implemented stricter financial controls, rebuilt damaged client relationships, and slowly restored trust in the James Global name. One evening, almost exactly a year after Diana's arrest, I found myself working late again. As I looked out over the city lights from my office window, I remembered something my father used to say: "Success isn't just about making money, live. It's about being able to look yourself in the mirror every morning." My phone buzzed. A text from Thomas. "Your father would be proud. Dinner next week to celebrate the quarterly numbers." I smiled, typing back a response. Diana had thought she could use my father's death to seize control, but she'd never understood what really made James Global strong. It wasn't just about profits or power. It was about integrity. About doing things the right way even when it was hard. The company weathered the storm, emerging stronger than ever. Diana's conviction made headlines again. Former JME's GLBLEXTC takes 25 years. Her co-conspirators, facing similar charges, began turning on each other, revealing even more depths to her schemes. But for me, the real victory wasn't in Diana's downfall. It was in proving that my father had been right to trust me with his legacy. The board's initial skepticism had turned to strong support as they saw how I handled the crisis and led the company's recovery. 1 year to the day after taking over as CEO, I stood in my father's old office, looking at his photograph on the wall. "You knew, didn't you?" I said softly to his smiling image. "You knew she would try something like this. That's why you left me all those breadcrumbs to follow." There was no response, of course, but I could almost hear his voice. "You did good, kid. You did good." I sat down at my desk, opening my laptop to review the latest expansion proposals. The company was growing again, this time on a foundation of real success, not fraudulent numbers. Diana's betrayal had nearly destroyed everything my father built, but in the end, it had only made us stronger. As I worked into the evening, I thought about how far we'd come. Diana had underestimated me, just like she'd underestimated my father's foresight. She thought she could steal his legacy, but instead, she'd help cement it through me. The lights of the city twinkled below as I finally packed up to head home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that James Global was more than just another corporation. It was a legacy of integrity, passed from father to daughter, stronger than ever. And somewhere in a federal prison, Diana had plenty of time to think about how spectacularly her plan had backfired. The empire she tried to steal was thriving without her, led by the very person she tried to destroy. Sometimes justice works out exactly as it should.